Hello, and welcome to Pub and Fig. In this episode, I'm going to go over what you should know before you watch Avengers Infinity War. Now, this is one of, if not the biggest, Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. Now, if you didn't know, this is part 4 of my MCU summary series. So, there will be a playlist at the back of this video if you want to go to the playlist and start from the beginning if you're not aware of this. So, with that, I hope you enjoy. Okay, so I'm going to start off this video with going over the events of Avengers Age of Ultron. Now, I won't cover all the details, even the stuff that was very fun to watch, because I am time pressured. So I'm going to try to make this video as short as possible for you. That way, you can better use your free time with other things. So, the movie starts off with the Avengers attacking a Hydra base in order to get Loki's scepter. Now, if you remember, S.H.I.E.L.D. was shut down, and Hydra sprang back up. And Hydra later then got a hold of Loki's scepter. So that's what the Avengers are doing. They're getting the Loki's scepter back and shutting down supposedly Hydra's last base. So they go there, they defeat the base, but they discovered that the scepter was used for kind of two things. It was used to power some contraptions, which seemed to be some robots, but it didn't really go anywhere. But it also gave powers to the Maximoff twins, but I'll just get to them later and I'll just go over who they are, opposed to explaining how they impacted this movie just because of time's sake. So the Avengers take the Loki scepter back to Avengers Tower, and then Tony Stark goes up to Bruce Banner and says, hey, how about you and I work on an AI project called Ultron? So of course Bruce agrees, and they start working on it, and their first attempt that finally works, of course, is when they're not in the lab, but it ends up developing cynical motives, and it says, hey, like, humans are like destroying the world. I'm pretty sure this is other than global warming, but he just decides to wipe out all the organisms on the planet. The Avengers see that he's a threat. Ultron takes the scepter back to the Hydra base, and he goes to those robots, and since Ultron is now his own unit, he goes up to the robots and put himself in there. So now he has multiple bodies, but it's like a hive mind. It's one mind, but over multiple bodies. So Ultron starts working his plan. The Avengers start following him, stuff like that. So Ultron's plan was, okay, he's going to steal some vibranium from Ulysses Claw, who is in Black Panther, for those of you that thought this picture was familiar. And then he also went to steal a contraption that a scientist had shown previously in this film, known as the Cradle, which pretty much can create artificial skin tissues. So he takes both of those and combines it with the Mind Stone, which was in Loki's scepter. If you don't know what I'm talking about by Mind Stone and stuff like that, watch my Infinity Stone video. So Ultron puts the vibranium and the Mind Stone into the Cradle, and that all mixes with the cell structure and stuff. The cells and the vibranium are compatible, and the Mind Stone, it's in one central location. Of course, the Avengers steal the Cradle before Ultron can finally finish his project on his own. So Tony's like, goes up to Bruce Banner, hey, how about we do something with this? Let's work on another project. Let's hope this one doesn't blow up in our faces. So, of course, Bruce Banner somehow manages to agree. But during all this, Thor had gotten a partial vision concerning Infinity Stone. So he went to a place to get his complete vision and stuff like that. So he comes back and puts in who knows how many volts into the Cradle to speed up its process. A red body comes out of the Cradle, and this becomes Vision. And I guess in the movies, this character got the name Vision because Thor had gotten some visions. In the comics, it did and didn't make more sense. But this red android is Vision, and he has the Mind Stone in his forehead. Now, I talked about him a little bit in my Infinity Stone video, so that's who he is. So, yeah, so Vision, with the Mind Stone, he can pretty much fly, can shoot lasers from the Mind Stone, and pretty much can go through things in tangibility. So Vision sides with the Avengers because Vision is apparently on the side of life, and Ultron is against life. So that's why Vision sides with the Avengers. So they figure out what Ultron's final steps of his plan were, and that was to lift up the city of Sokovia with more vibranium, and then he would drop it, and it would pretty much be like an imitation of the asteroid that supposedly killed the dinosaurs. So by the time the Avengers got there, it had already started lifting a little bit. So they take like 10 minutes fighting Ultron and all of his different bodies and stuff like that. But there was all those civilians there, so they couldn't completely destroy the city with all the civilians on it. So then up comes like an old-fashioned helicarrier with Nick Fury on it, and I guess he had recruited some SHIELD agents, not Hydra SHIELD agents, to run it. So they got all the people off of the floating city and put them on the helicarrier. So the Avengers still fought all these Ultron robots while the civilians were evacuating. Once they all got off, most of the Ultron bots were dead. So the Avengers got off, well, all the Avengers except for Thor and Iron Man, because they had to stay around in order to blow up Sokovia. So they succeeded, the Avengers succeeded, and Vision actually killed the last Ultron bot. So where does that leave everybody? Now, the Hulk, Bruce Banner Hulk stuff, so he had gotten on a little rampage, and I'll get into a little bit why, at one town, and Tony had to stop him, so Tony had equipped the Hulkbuster armor, so he had beaten the Hulk, but the Hulk, that wasn't the Bruce Banner Hulk. This Hulk was like driven mad. So the Hulk gets on a Quinjet and flies. And then where's everybody else? So Thor also leaves, but that's because he's also on a quest of finding other Infinity Stones, and because apparently most of them have been found throughout the other movies. So Thor went off to find some more. So the rest of the Earth Avengers stayed on Earth, and they're going to be in Captain America Civil War. But before I go there, I got to talk about the Maximoff twins, the people that got their powers from the Mind Stone. Now, so there's two of them, one of which actually died in this movie, so I'll just get to him first. This was Pietro Maximoff, and he was the Quicksilver. He could pretty much slow down time for himself, or another way to simplify it, he could pretty much go really fast. And then his sister, who did survive and actually became an Avenger, was Wanda Maximoff, who became the Scarlet Witch. Now, she has a whole lot of powers, and she's the reason why the Hulk went all rampaging and stuff. So she has telekinetic powers, meaning she can move things with her mind. She can mess with people's minds. She gave a few people visions, including Thor. And she also can mind control a little bit, just mind manipulate. That's what happened to the Hulk. Okay, so before I get into the events of Civil War, I should talk about some characters that are in that movie that have been within the MCU, and I haven't talked about them yet. So there's War Machine, aka James Rhodes, aka Rhodey, who is a friend of Iron Man, and he pretty much has his own Iron Man suit. Now, this isn't the most updated Iron Man suit, nowhere close to that at all, but it pretty much has a lot of bombs and ammo and Gatling guns and a whole bunch of stuff like that. And then there's Falcon, who is in the second Captain America movie. Civil War is the third. And Falcon pretty much has a special kind of backpack, I'll say, that can like sprout wings, and it's pretty much like a jetpack. But it has wings on it that help him maneuver and stuff like that. And he wields pistols. And then there's Bucky. Now, Bucky is pretty important, especially to this film, but I won't go into that plot. I just want to talk about the aftermath. So, Bucky is Captain America's friend ever since World War II. Now, some of you that are new to Marvel, watching my other summaries might be like, how? But if Bucky was in World War II, shouldn't he be like really ancient right now? Yes, however. So Bucky had supposedly died in the first Captain America film. However, in the second Captain America film, Winter Soldier, it was discovered that he was alive, that he was taken in by Hydra, and had been brainwashed or whatever, and had been going on their assignments. His left arm had apparently needed to be severed or had come off or something, so they gave him a robotic left arm. Pretty cool and pretty high-tech. So he became the Winter Soldier. Now, he's starting to get more of his memory back, but he still has like more of that military Hydra code, although he's like his own thing. He knows what's right and wrong now, like how we perceive it and stuff like that, but he's hiding because he's probably still hunted. And then there's also Ant-Man, but I won't talk about him in this video. I'll talk about him in part 5. Okay, Captain America Civil War. What happens? So, the movie, I'll just summarize it as best as I can. The government sees the Avengers as a threat pretty much to the world because they're not taking responsibility and consequences for their actions, such as the events in New York left a whole lot of devastation, and of course the events in Sokovia that left a whole lot of devastation, especially right around the world, especially since it was caused by the Avengers in the first place, Tony Stark in particular. So yeah, so pretty much the governments of the world think, hey, the Avengers are not taking responsibility, so they create the Sokovia Accords, which pretty much say, hey, the Avengers have to follow our rules. Avengers are not their own individual unit. They do whatever the government says, when and where, and pretty much whatever we say, they do. Whatever we don't say, they don't do, stuff like that. So half of the Avengers agreed, which included Iron Man, Black Widow, War Machine, and the Vision. Those 4. But then there were others that thought, no, the Avengers need to be on their own. What if there's an event that the governments don't let them do? So that side included Captain America, Falcon, Hawkeye, who was supposed to be in retirement, but no. And also the Scarlet Witch. Pretty much 4v4 because there's only 8 Avengers at the time. Well, 10 if you count Thor and Hulk, but they're somewhere else currently and they're not even aware of this. The teams, are butting heads about what the Avengers should do. But of course, there's a whole lot of incidents. Bucky is framed, so the governments are trying to go after him, especially since Bucky is framed for an attempt of an assault at the UN, like a bombing at the UN, which kills the King of Wakanda, which brings in the Black Panther. Now, the Black Panther is T'Challa, and he pretty much has enhanced ability similar to Captain America. However, this guy has a full-on black vibranium suit. So he's pretty much Captain America, except from Africa is a king, and has a full-on suit opposed to just a shield. Pretty much Captain Wakanda. So he sides with Tony's side because they're with the government. But of course, there needed to be some kind of fight scene. So Tony, for some reason, recruits Spider-Man. No introduction needed, hopefully. On Cap's side, they get Bucky, make sure he's safe. And they also recruit Ant-Man, who, I'll just shorten this up for this video. He can pretty much shrink and grow back to normal size, hence the name Ant-Man. So pretty much there's like a fight in an airport at one point. But I'm just going to talk about the aftermath for time's sake. You can watch this movie if you want to actually see this movie. It is pretty good. The aftermath, the Avengers are divided, so there's no single Avengers team anymore. There's pretty much the legal Avengers and the illegal Avengers. The Black Widow, she felt that the legal side was right, but she actually joins the illegal side. Spider-Man was given a suit made by Tony Stark, but that's pretty much all you need to know. If you want to watch Spider-Man Homecoming, feel free, but that movie doesn't really affect Infinity War in any way. And Bucky, so there was some confusion, and so once Black Panther figured out that Bucky was framed, he was willing to protect Bucky at Wakanda. He also lost his metal arm to Iron Man, so pretty much he's just walking around with like a little nub here because the rest of his arm's gone. So yeah, so Bucky's in Wakanda, Black Panther's in Wakanda, running Wakanda, which you could watch the Black Panther movie if you want, but that movie only pretty much gives emphasis on the location of Wakanda. That's pretty much it. The Avengers are divided, Bucky's in Wakanda, Black Panther's in Wakanda, Spider-Man's doing his own stuff. Yeah, Avengers are divided. So as long as you know who's on what side, that's good to know. Oh yes, and the Vision and the Scarlet Witch somehow started some kind of relationship. Maybe it's because they started talking about how they both got their powers from the Mind Stone and all that stuff. Watch Civil War if you want to figure out how this relationship is. I'm not going to talk about it for time's sake. Okay, so before I inform you of where Thor and Hulk were, I will tell you about the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now these characters are pretty important in the events of Avengers Infinity War, so I'll explain who they are. Okay, so there's Star-Lord, aka Peter Quill. He is half human and half celestial in the movies. But both of his parents are dead, so currently he is like the leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And then there's Gamora, who is green skin, and she is the adopted daughter of Thanos. I will get into who Thanos is in a little bit. She's the adopted daughter of Thanos, but she hates Thanos, and for good reason. So she hates Thanos, but she has like lots of assassin skills. Like she carries like a sword all the time and blasters and stuff like that. So she's like a really good assassin. And then there's Rocket, who he's pretty easy to sum up. He comes in the form of like some kind of raccoon, although he doesn't know what a raccoon is. And he loves weapons. Like he loves explosives, he loves guns, he loves any type of weapon, anything with the word weapon or danger. Now Groot is a humanoid tree, I'll say, that only says the words I am Groot, and in that order, but it's like his own language. The Guardians of the Galaxy eventually all understand them. So it's those four, as well as Drax. Now Drax, he's muscle of the team. He has like 2 knives. He's pretty much all muscle. Then there's Mantis, who is the newest member of the group. She has like weird bug eyes and weird antennae. But she does have a neat power, which is she can read feelings and like not necessarily reading the mind like how some psychics do, but she can pretty much read how you're feeling and can change your feelings. But one other ability she has is putting people to sleep and waking them up. Now by sleep, I don't mean death. I just mean putting them in like a nap. So Nebula is a friend of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And she is blue skinned, and she's a sister of Gamora, but not blood related, nowhere close to that at all. She also was raised by Thanos. However, she also hates Thanos. So, why does she hate Thanos? Well, it's also his motives, which I'll get into in a little bit. But also, she's like gotten most of her body replaced by some kind of robotic machinery. So yeah, she's been pretty much abused by Thanos. What about Thor and Hulk? So, in the beginning of Thor Ragnarok, Thor says he was searching for Infinity Stones, didn't find any. His father Odin dies, which releases Thor's unknown sister, Hela. And Hela wants to rule Asgard through pretty much very violent means. Mjolnir is destroyed, so Thor's screwed. So Thor eventually somehow ends up on the planet Sakaar, which is a gladiator planet, and that's where the Hulk apparently has been. So the Hulk, who was in a Quinjet, must have gotten into some wormhole to Sakaar. So Thor finds Hulk there. He and Hulk escape at Sakaar and go back to Asgard because Thor says, hey, I need to help my people. Loki also ended up on Sakaar, but he didn't leave with Thor and Hulk. But he did steal like a giant blue vessel and went up to Asgard, but it took him a little while. So Thor realizes the only way to truly defeat Hela is to actually destroy Asgard itself, since that's where his power was coming from. So once Loki arrived, they realized, oh, look, here's this big blue vessel. Let's get all of the Asgardians on here. So they use that as like a refugee vessel. And Thor tells Loki, hey, there's this certain thing in the treasure room. I need you to put this on a certain thing, and then it'll eventually destroy Asgard. It's not the Tesseract, though. However, as Loki was doing that, he passed the Tesseract. So Loki grabs the Tesseract, he leaves with everybody. So Asgard's destroyed, Hell is destroyed. So now the Asgardians have no home, so that's why Thor was going to Earth. That way the Asgardians can find life there. However, in the Thor Ragnarok post-credit scene, we see a giant ship, I'll say, like come up in front of them. And this is like 5 times bigger than their blue refugee vessel. Now, who does this belong to? This belongs to Thanos. So Thanos is a giant, like Hulk-sized, purple-skinned guy who's pretty intelligent, but he has sinister motives. Now, I won't actually spoil them because they are mentioned in Infinity War, the movie, so I'll just let you learn through that. But Thanos, I'll say this, has a special tool known as the Infinity Gauntlet, which can harness the power of the Infinity Stones. So Thanos has been searching for Infinity Stones this whole time. Thanos was the one that sent Loki to Earth in the first Avengers with that army. It was Thanos' army. Thanos has been trying to get each Infinity Stone over time, or has been tracking them. So Thanos is pretty much trying to get every single Infinity Stone. Okay guys, that is all I have in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, remember what each of the Infinity Stones do. Watch my Infinity Stone video if you need to. And feel free to watch my other videos if you need to remember. Now, the video I will release next in the series, part 5, to finish this, is before you watch Avengers Endgame. So make sure you watch Avengers Infinity War beforehand. That way you know what I'm going to talk about next. So with that, sayonara.